Good day, creative friends, and welcome back to another watercolor and doodle video. This one is a bit of an experiment with masking. I divided my paper in 12 rectangles with artist tape to create a grid. I wanted to create the illusion of looking at a painting through a window with multiple panes. The challenge was to paint and doodle as if the tape wasn't there. The painting part wasn't too bad, but the doodling was a bit mind-boggling, and I'll come back to that later. For the painting part, I had no plans. I basically dropped blobs of paint randomly. I went for just 3 colors to keep things simple. I used green gold, perylene green, and Payne's gray, and I really like this color combo because I think the Payne's gray gives contrast, and it also acts as a good neutral color even though it has a blue undertone. Here's a tip for you when masking, especially in a grid fashion like this. Make sure that you burnish the tape really well, especially where 2 strips cross each other. Otherwise you'll end up with paint bleeding underneath the tape and the masking obviously won't be successful. I use a bone folder to burnish my tape, but you can also use a plastic ruler, or even your fingernails would do the trick. At this stage, I thought I had added too much paint, but I think it's just an illusion because, as you see, the paint beads up on the tape, and it's a bit disturbing in the sense that it feels as if something went wrong. The paint is not as consistent as how it looks on the paper, obviously, so it's almost as if you missed something, or yeah, something is not well polished. It's difficult to explain, but if you're trying this technique, you'll understand what I mean. So the trick is not to be bothered by the tape and just keep going. But when I was mentioning earlier about the doodling part being a bit of a challenge, it was for that reason, but also because the tape, like the pen was getting caught in the tape in some places. So I really had to be careful there. It's doable. It's not like I make it sound as if it's dramatic, but it's not. I made it work in the end. You just have to remain a bit loose. And also, even though it looks busy right now, when you remove the tape, because whatever's underneath the tape is white, it provides a rest for the eyes. So it totally works. You just have to almost like plow through that part. It does get better in the end. So my fear of having applied too much paint was not real. It was really just an illusion. So I just kept going, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. Plus the fact that I was using this pen that writes a very fine line. It's 0.38 millimeter. Yeah. It just enhanced that illusion because it wasn't strong enough to support the heavy paint. But I had a plan for this, and you'll see that later. So once I realized why I was feeling this way, and I knew how to not correct it, but I knew how to address it, then I was able to create a little bit more freely and not be bogged down by trying to overthink everything. As you can see, I wasn't too precious about the lines that I was making inside that circle. Because I was filming with my phone, so it blocks my view a bit. I have to rely on the phone view. And also because I knew I was going to reinforce some lines, so it's a great way to correct things that might have gone, like especially lines that have gone too far. Just add some weight to a line makes all the difference. And this is how I was also able to make the doodling more prominent and therefore support the heavy paint. I also used a bigger marker to create dots in some of those flowers or blobs. I call them flowers. I don't know what they are, what kind they are, but they're flowers. So dots is another go-to of mine, and I spoke about that in I think it was 2 videos ago, about using what makes you feel comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that. Even if you feel like you're repeating yourself, you're not really, because the more you do what makes you feel comfortable, the more able you will become to try new things. So don't get discouraged if you feel like you're reverting to the same thing over and over again. You're just honing on your skills. That's all you're doing. I'm doing that too. I'm still learning just like everybody else. So for now, dots are my go-to. lines are my go-to. And I've also discovered that I'm now, because I'm doing so many of these repetitive patterns, I'm able to visually see if my dots or my lines are in the right shape and place. Again, more on that later. But here's where it makes the difference. Again, as you see, I'm thickening I'm thickening some of the lines. I'm adding weight to them in the shape of kind of like shading, I want to say, reinforcing like tight corners and maybe the bottom of each of these flowers, just to create the illusion of depth. I wanted to also, whoops, little dot there, unwanted, I just noticed. I'm working on a rough paper, so it's a bit tricky, so maybe you can work on something that has less texture, because this made my life a little bit more difficult. But I do love the look of rough texture, so it's kind of like, but I want to use it. Just like a child. No, let me have my rough texture. Here you can already see the difference in that leaf, how it just comes back to life. All of a sudden, it's not so lost within that paint. So I've done that pretty much everywhere. I did cut a bit of these sequences just because the video would have been way too heavy. And also I needed to be really close to my work, and you would have seen the top of my head. So I needed to be comfortable. Caution about removing the tape. Obviously, even though this is artist tape, it will rip your paper. I get this question all the time. All the tapes that I've tried will rip the paper if you're not careful. I use a heat tool to remove the tape, or to heat set the tape a little bit. That has the effect of softening the glue a bit. But I still have to be careful when I pull the tape. Here's what I was talking about. I had dots in the green flowers, and I also had some white ones in the blue shapes, and they were the same size. And so to me, there was no difference between the green and the blue flowers. So what I decided to do inside the blue flowers is to add more dots to make the pattern more dense, and that way I was able to make them look a lot different, but they're still just dots. So another thing to keep in mind, little tricks like that. Yeah, back to the tape. I did burnish it really well, but I've noticed in some places that the paint had seeped under because I worked on rough paper. So it's quite textured, so obviously it's difficult to get the tape going inside all the little dips. But I was able to correct all that, whatever was leaking underneath or leaked with a white gel pen. So no harm there. And we're done. There's my signature. So I hope you found this fun. I really do love the painting. And please remember that all the supplies will be listed in the description of the video. As usual, I want to say a huge thank you to my awesome patrons who support my art over at Patreon. And thank you also to all of you, my creative friends, for watching this video and for commenting and liking. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Please stay safe and healthy, be mindful and accepting of others, keep creating, and I will see you soon.